The first time Kellan Voss saw the egg, it was cradled in a bundle of thermal wraps and humming faintly. The alien student holding it, a lanky, blue-skinned being named Errel, stood awkwardly in the corner of the engineering workshop like someone who'd wandered into a room they weren't supposed to be in. Kellan blinked at the egg, then at Errel. "Is that alive?" he asked, setting down a half-soldered circuit board. Errol's chest inflated slightly, which Kellan had learned was a sign of nervousness. "It is not viable. I have attempted the standard protocols. Incubation failed. Heat distribution inconsistent. It is mine." That last part hung in the air. Kellan wiped his hands on his pants and approached. The egg was smooth and slightly translucent, with pale veins threading beneath its surface. It made a soft chirping sound like a heartbeat run through a synthesizer. "Looks warm," he said. "You sure it's not working?" "I am not a hatch parent. My colony's genetics do not permit personal brooding. I was permitted to bring one during the exchange program. Regulations required it to be non-viable for transport, but I ran tests. It should hatch. It just won't." Kellan didn't know what to say to that. "So you carried that thing across a solar system just to watch it die?" "I hoped it would not." Kellan rubbed the back of his neck. He'd met Errel 2 months ago in their shared applied mechanics course. The alien was quiet, strange, and brilliant with fluid dynamics, but hopeless at anything that involved heat regulation. He also didn't seem to understand sarcasm and took cafeteria chili as a threat to his entire digestive system. "All right," Kellan said. "Let's try something." He cleared a corner of the bench and gestured for Errel to set the egg down. Then he started digging through the junk bins. 3 hours later, they had a pile of stripped thermistors, a cracked Arduino board, some salvaged resistance coils, and a busted heating pad from the infirmary's reject pile. Kellan stared at it all, then glanced at Errel, who was watching him like a desperate raccoon. "I'm not promising anything," he said, "but I've built worse." The first prototype looked like a microwave had swallowed a space heater and then thrown up. Kellan wired it to a scavenged touchscreen they'd taken from an abandoned training pod, then rigged a fan system using old computer parts. Heat regulation was the main problem. Too much, and the egg would cook. Too little, and it would stay dormant. Errel monitored the embryo's readings constantly, feeding data to Kellan, who adjusted the thermostat code in real time. They worked in shifts, sleeping on the floor of the workshop and living off vending machine burritos and powdered tea. By day 6, the egg was pulsing more regularly, the chirping stronger. "I think it's stabilizing," Kellan said, trying not to sound too hopeful. "Heart rate's consistent." "You sure this species doesn't need, like, singing or something?" "Singing? Some birds on Earth you gotta sing to the eggs, helps them imprint or whatever." Errel stared at him. "Your species is inefficient. You brought an egg across the stars with no plan, man." "I had hope," Kellan sighed. "Yeah, that sounds like us too." On day 9, disaster struck. Kellan was running diagnostics when the screen flicked to red. "Temperature spike," he yelled. Errel rushed in from the hallway, eyes wide. "Fan failure," Kellan said. "The main driver's toast." He reached in to swap out the faulty fan, but his wrist brushed an exposed coil. A jolt shot up his arm and he jerked back, crashing into the workbench with a cry. Errel caught him before he hit the floor completely. Kellan groaned, clutching his arm. "That's not good. That's really not good." They got him to the infirmary, where the med-bot ran tests and declared he had second-degree burns and a fractured ulna from the fall. "Great," he muttered, staring at his bandaged arm. "There goes my soldering hand." "You are injured because of me," Errel said quietly. "Because of the egg," Kellan corrected. "And because I'm an idiot who didn't insulate properly. I will dismantle the incubator." "It is not worth your health." Kellan looked at him. "You carried that thing light years. You're not quitting now. I cannot maintain it alone. So get someone else to help. I'll walk you through it." "But I didn't say I'd stop helping. I said I can't solder." "There's a difference." Kellan spent the next week supervising from a wheeled chair, his arm in a cast and a tablet balanced on his lap. Errel took over the actual physical work, guided by Kellan's detailed instructions. They upgraded the insulation, swapped in a better fan system, and added a humidity regulator using an old terrarium fogger. The egg responded. On day 16, the first crack appeared. Kellan was asleep under the bench when Errel shook him awake. "It is happening," he said, voice flat but trembling. Kellan sat up too fast, winced, and grabbed his arm. "Show me." They crowded around the incubator as the egg trembled, the chirping now loud enough to echo in the workshop. A hairline fracture split across the surface, then another. A wet sliver of gray-blue shell flaked away. A small, slick creature pushed its snout through the gap, blinking wide, unfocused eyes. Errel made a sound Kellan hadn't heard before, something between a sigh and a hum. "That's it," Kellan whispered. "You did it." "We did it," Errel said. The creature Errel called it a vela was no bigger than a kitten, with translucent skin and a wobbly gait. It needed heat, soft light, and low sound levels. Kellan helped design a secondary chamber for it, using repurposed lab equipment and the remnants of their failed prototypes. His arm healed slowly. The fractures took 6 weeks to mend, and the burns left a patch of discolored skin near his wrist. He went back to classes with a brace and a list of things he wasn't allowed to lift, but he didn't care. The vela thrived. By week 8, it was walking steadily and chirping at Errel whenever he entered the room. "You gonna keep it?" Kellan asked one afternoon. "I may not be permitted to return with it. My people do not raise hatchlings individually. That's stupid. It is tradition." "So, break it?" Errel tilted his head. "You do that often." Kellan grinned. "That's how all our best stuff gets made." Near the end of the semester, faculty from both Earth and Errel's home planet came to inspect the incubator. The design was crude but effective. The vela was healthy, responsive, and had bonded with Errel in a way that surprised even the xenobiologists. Kellan stood back as the observers took notes and snapped photos. He was still wearing his brace, but the cast was gone. His fingers tingled sometimes, but the doctors said that would fade. After the observers left, Errel approached him. "I am applying for a special extension to stay with the vela." Kellan blinked. "You can do that. There are precedents. It will require advocacy, evidence." "I will cite your assistance." "You sure you want to stay on Earth?" Errel looked at the vela, who was curled up and chirping in sleep. "I wish to learn how to break traditions and build new ones." Kellan chuckled. "You've definitely come to the right place." The vela sneezed. Not a cute, kitteny sneeze either. More like a wet hiccup followed by a vibrating whistle from its second nostril. Errel had explained it had 3, which Kellan had decided not to emotionally process. It was late afternoon in the campus biofab annex, where they'd moved the incubator system to keep the creature away from the noise and temperature swings of the workshop. The room smelled faintly of dried algae and sterilizer. The vela blinked slowly, then sneezed again and curled tighter into its heat cradle. "That's the 4th one in an hour," Kellan said, kneeling beside the clear panel. "You sure it's not sick?" "It is undergoing respiratory adaptation," Errel said, tapping a set of readings on his tablet. "Atmospheric composition here is 32% denser than its origin biome. The membranes in its upper passages are thickening." "Is that a good thing?" Errel hesitated. "It is not fatal." "That's not a yes." "It is unknown," he admitted. "There are no prior records of vela adapting post-hatch in foreign environments." Kellan leaned back on his heels, brushing dust off his jeans. "So we're in uncharted territory, again." Errel lowered his tablet. "You do not appear distressed." "I'm trying not to be the guy who panics every time a space lizard coughs." "The vela is not a lizard." "You say that, but it definitely tried to eat a moth this morning. Moths are not toxic to it." "Still not the point." The vela hiccuped again, then let out a soft warble and rolled onto its back. A faint shimmer ran across its skin, shifting from misty gray to a pale turquoise. Errel tilted his head. That coloration is not in the hatchling spectrum, Kellan frowned. Like it's not supposed to do that. No documented vela have displayed chromatophore activity before their second growth cycle. Maybe it's just special. Special is not a scientific category. Then call it unexpected. You guys love that word. Errel didn't argue. Instead, he reached into the enclosure and gently adjusted the creature's heat pad. The vela nuzzled his hand and chirped faintly. Kellan stood and stretched, wincing as his wrist gave a dull pulse. He rotated it gently. The sensation wasn't pain exactly, just a numb tingle that hadn't gone away since the cast came off. "You are still recovering," Errel said, not looking up. "Yeah, I know. The campus doc says nerves can take months to settle. I'm supposed to avoid direct heat and repetitive motion. You constructed an infrared chamber 3 days ago, built it left-handed, mostly." Errel turned his gaze toward him. "Why do you persist with such effort? You mean helping you?" "Yes." Kellan scratched the side of his head. "Because you asked. I stated the egg was non-viable, and I didn't buy it." Errel was quiet a moment. "Most would have accepted that." "Sure," Kellan said. "But most people haven't seen what a toaster, a space heater, and desperation can do together." The door behind them hissed open, and a new figure entered, tall, jointed oddly, with lavender skin and a flickering ocular ridge. Kellan recognized her vaguely from the Zenobio department. "Errel," she said, her voice clicking faintly, "you submitted your extension petition. That is irregular. I followed the guidelines. You listed an Earth-born as your co-author on the adaptation protocol. That is accurate." She turned her gaze to Kellan. "You are the human, depends," Kellan said. "Are you here to give me a scholarship or vaporize me?" She didn't react. "I am Dr. Ner," she said. "I am evaluating Errel's application on behalf of the Exchange Program's Interspecies Welfare Board." "Nice," Kellan said. "You want a chair? I will stand." She approached the enclosure and observed the vela, who stretched lazily and emitted a low trill. "This creature should not exist here," she said. "No offense," Kellan said, "but I've heard that sentence a lot lately, and I'm starting to take it personally." "You misunderstand. The genetic traits exhibited are not consistent with known developmental pathways. The chromatophores, the vocal range, the tolerance to foreign proteins, these are anomalies." Errel's hand tightened slightly on the edge of the incubator. "I am aware." Dr. Ner looked at him. "And you still wish to remain its caretaker?" "I do. You are a student. You have no training in exoparental imprinting or end-stage neural bonding." Kellan stepped forward. "Okay, but neither did he when we started. And now the thing chirps when he enters the room and won't eat unless he's around." "That is not evidence of bonding," she said. "Then you're missing the point." She turned to him fully. "You are not qualified to advise on vela biology." "Nope," Kellan said. "But I'm really good at keeping things alive that shouldn't be." Dr. Ner watched him for a long, uncomfortable moment, then she tapped a control on her wrist. A soft chime echoed. "Your data logs will be reviewed further. I will return in 1 cycle." She left without another word. Kellan exhaled. "She's a delight." "She is considered progressive by her peers," Errel said. "That's terrifying." Later that evening, after the lab lights dimmed and the building emptied, Kellan sat with his feet on a rolling stool, watching the vela bob its head to the low hum of the incubator. "Do you think you'll get the extension?" he asked. Errel was adjusting the nutrient drip for the creature's evening feed. "It is unlikely. My colony values conformity. They let you bring the egg, as an exception. Exceptions are not meant to succeed." Kellan leaned his head back against the wall. "That's messed up. It is tradition. You keep saying that like it's a good excuse." Errel didn't respond immediately. Then, without looking up, he said, "Traditions are not always logical, but they are familiar." "That sounds like fear to me." Errel paused. "Perhaps. But fear can be a stabilizer, until it keeps you from doing what matters." The vela chirped and tried to climb the side of its enclosure, slipping and tumbling back into its nest. It shook itself off and tried again. Kellan watched in silence. You know, he said eventually, I was supposed to drop engineering last year. Errel glanced at him. Why? Failed an advanced systems course, twice. Professor said I didn't have the mindset for structured design. You built a viable life support cradle from discarded parts and a malfunctioning thermal plate. Yeah, but I'm bad at multiple choice. Errel gave the faintest huff a sound Kellan had learned meant amusement. You should document the modifications you made to the heat regulator, he said. It may be the only stable model we have. I thought you were the one writing the reports. I am, but I cannot explain your intuition. Kellan tilted his head. You asking me to co-author something? I am requesting your expertise. That's way more polite than most of my professors. They worked in silence for a while. The Vela finally gave up on climbing and curled into its nest, its shimmers fading to a soft, cloudy hue. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the high windows. Kellan yawned. You can sleep here, Errel said without looking up. I will monitor it through the night. You sure? Yes, you need rest for your hand to finish healing. Kellan flexed his fingers. The tingling had faded slightly. Thanks, he said. You're not so bad at caretaking yourself. Errel adjusted the data feed. I am learning from an unqualified source, Kellan grinned. Best kind of education, the Vela had learned to mimic sounds. Not full words, not exactly, but patterns, pitches, even the rhythm of Errel's footsteps. It whistled in triplets when it was content and let out a low, burbling whine when it wanted attention. It had also taken a troubling interest in the sound of Kellan's wrist brace clacking against metal. You've created a tiny, chirping parrot lizard, Kellan muttered, watching it from the hover stool. And I think it's mocking me. It is associating auditory cues with presence and behavior, Errel said, tapping through new readings. That is a sign of cognitive linking. So it's smart. Errel nodded. Smarter than anticipated. The Vela was currently curled around a temperature probe, happily vibrating. Its skin had developed a faint patterned swirls of pale blue that shifted across its back when it moved. Kellan watched it scrabble at the edge of the enclosure, trying to drag the probe closer. You want me to move it? He asked. No, I am observing its grip reflex. I'm observing its stubbornness. It is a shared trait. Kellan didn't argue. His wrist was out of the brace now, though he still wrapped it some days when the joint ached. The med unit had cleared him for light activity as long as he avoided heavy torque or sudden pressure. He flexed his hand slowly. The fingers moved fine, but twisting motions still felt off, like the bones weren't entirely convinced they wanted to be part of the plan. You should not push recovery, Errel said without looking up. I'm not, just checking. Your expression suggests discomfort. That's just how my face looks. Humans are built to look vaguely annoyed all the time. Errel didn't respond. Instead, he adjusted the data stream and angled the enclosure's light panel slightly. The Vela chirped and rolled onto its side, exposing a line of developing sensory nodes along its flank. Those weren't visible yesterday, Kellan said. No, they are responding to the modified atmosphere. Is that good or bad? We do not have a category for it. So, as usual, it's doing something new. Errel gave a quiet hum. It is adapting more rapidly than projected. Kellan leaned closer to the enclosure. Think it's because of Earth, possibly. The environmental variance may be stimulating accelerated development. Or maybe it just likes the weird noises here. The cafeteria blender does seem to excite it. See, that proves it. The Vela is powered by chaos. Errel reached into the chamber to reposition the probe. The Vela latched onto his fingers with surprising strength, chirping in irregular pulses. It recognizes your presence, Kellan said. It registers my scent and pulse pattern. That's what I said. Errel carefully detached the creature and set it back into its cradle. It protested with a drawn-out whistle, then settled again. They kept watch for another hour, logging the creature's movements and temperature shifts. At some point, Kellan's back started to ache and he shifted on the stool. I can transfer the logs, Errel said. You can leave if needed. I'm good, just need to stretch. You slept in the chair again. Yeah, well, the Vela has separation anxiety, and so do I. Errol lifted a brow ridge. You are not bonded to it. Kellan shrugged. I built its first crib from a broken toaster. That's emotional investment. Later that evening, after the main lab lights dimmed and the annex went quiet, Dr. Ner returned. She entered without announcement, scanning the enclosure immediately. The Vela was asleep, its coloration darkened to a muted gray-green. Errol stood, but didn't speak. Kellan stayed seated. I have reviewed the supplemental data, Dr. Ner said. The changes are extensive. They are stable, Errol replied. Stability is not the concern. You have deviated from colony protocols in every significant way. Errol said nothing. The silence stretched. Kellan scratched his jaw. If it's healthy, what's the problem? The problem, Ner said flatly, is that this creature now displays traits incompatible with reintegration. So it's too earthy. It is no longer a standard Vela. Genetic drift has begun. Kellan blinked. Already, Doctor. Ner looked at him. Your species underestimates the impact of environmental stressors on post-hatch morphology. I just think it likes the electric kettle. She ignored that. You understand, she said to Errol, that if you remain, you will be classified as an independent caretaker. Outside the colony network, no support, no resources. I know, Errol said, you will be responsible for all biological, legal, and ethical decisions involving the specimen. I accept that. Kellan glanced between them. Wait, that's it. You're letting him stay. I am not authorizing anything. I am documenting the outcome. The program will not intervene. But he doesn't get sent back. Dr. Ner's gaze didn't waver. There is no precedent for this situation. You have created a third path. She turned to leave. At the doorway, she hesitated. Do not mistake exception for endorsement, she said. Then she was gone. Kellan exhaled. She's a ray of sunshine. Errol sat back down. It is done. You're staying. I am. The Vela twitched in its sleep, letting out a small, fragmented trill. Kellan leaned forward. So what now? You raise it like a space puppy? I will need to construct a larger containment unit. It will begin ambulatory exploration soon. I'm guessing that means it'll start running around and licking wires. Possibly. I can help with the containment build. If I use my left hand, I only ruin half the measurements. Errol tilted his head. You do not need to assist further. Yeah, but I want to. You have no formal obligation. Neither did you when you brought the egg. They worked in silence for a while, sketching out designs for a mobile habitat module using scavenged parts from the robotics club. The plan included modular walls, temperature zoning, and a retractable play area. Kellan insisted on padding the corners. We should give it a name, he said eventually. Errol looked up. That is not customary. You've already broken half your customs, might as well go all in. Errol considered. Names carry intention. Exactly. So pick one that means something. After a long pause, Errol said, Tessari. Kellan raised an eyebrow. What's it mean? In my dialect, it is the concept of an unexpected path. He grinned. Perfect. The next morning, they presented Tessari to a small group of Zenobio faculty and Earth-based researchers. The creature demonstrated active recognition behaviors, responded to Errol's voice, and even produced a brief mimicry of the lab's startup chime. The faculty asked questions. Some skeptical, some curious. Kellan answered technical ones about the incubator. Errol spoke about the adaptation patterns. By the end, no one denied that Tessari was thriving. As the group filtered out, one of the Earth researchers paused beside Kellan. You built that system from scrap, she asked. Kellan nodded. Ever consider applying to the Interplanetary Engineering Exchange? He blinked. Is that a real thing? It is now. She handed him a contact chip and left. Kellan turned to Errol. You think I should apply? You are already navigating uncharted systems. He looked at Tessari, who was wrestling a temperature sensor. Yeah, he muttered. That checks out. Errol adjusted the enclosure's light panel again, watching the creature with a quiet focus. You're really doing this, Kellan said. You're going solo, raising it here. I am not alone. Kellan smiled. Nope, you've got the weirdest team in the galaxy. Tessari chirped, then tried to eat the corner of its cradle. Kellan sighed. Starting to think we should have built a lid. We can add one tonight. After dinner, I'm starving. Are you suggesting we feed it cafeteria chili again? No. I'm not that cruel. They left the annex together, lights dimming behind them, the soft hum of the habitat module fading as they stepped into the corridor. Tessari chirped once more before curling back into its nest, warm, content, and entirely, impossibly alive.